Hi, Joe.
Julie, Matt, Aaron, how's it going?
Everyone.
Sorry, I had you on mute.
How are
No
you guys
worries.
today?
Doing all right.
Good.
Did you just say still early? Matt?
No, I said I'm doing all right.
Oh, I thought you said it's still early, and I was like, what is that supposed to mean?
No, I've been up since way too early to be still early right now, so.
I kind of figured, especially being in the surveying line of business.
Just so everyone knows before you call it order, I know you heard from Greg, Jim. I haven't heard from Matt, and I know he wasn't at our last meeting. I'm looking at the recording, it looked like, or the previous one. So I should probably check in with him if he doesn't show up tonight.
I would agree. So I'll give Matt another minute or two, and if we don't hear from him, then I'll call it to order at around in a minute or two.
Great.
While we're waiting, has everyone else who has called on been able to review the meeting minutes from the last meeting, or is that, I know they got pushed out a little bit later than anticipated.
I have not finished reviewing so now.
Okay.
I looked at it a few months ago.
There we go. Looks like there's Matt. Matt, how's it going?
Going well. How about yourself?
Not too bad. So in that case, I'd like to call this the July 18th meeting for the MBTA Section 3A working group to order. I'll do attendance for attendance by roll call. So Matt Lowry.
Yeah.
Julie Smith Galvin.
Yes.
Robin Greenberg.
Here.
Matt Bowen.
Here.
And Aaron Kokinda.
Here.
And so the only member of the working group who's not in attendance is Greg McIntosh, who let Aaron and I know in advance that he wasn't going to be attending. So in that case, moving to the approval of the meeting minutes from June 6th, as well as the June 20th, 2023 meeting minutes. I think I heard Matt said that he wasn't finished his review. Robin had. I think, Matt, you were not at, I think, the June 6th meeting, if I recall.
That's correct.
And then Julie, did you get a chance to take a look at the
I did go through them quickly. I didn't see anything that stuck out, so I'm okay.
In that case, I think we probably have enough to do an approval of the meeting minutes based on that. So in that case, do I hear a motion to accept the June 6th, 2023 meeting minutes as presented?
I'll actually motion for both of them. No need to separate them.
Fair enough. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, in that case, roll call vote. Matt Lowry.
Abstain.
Julie Smith Galvin.
Yes.
Robin Greenberg.
Yes.
Matt Bowen.
Abstain.
Aaron Kokinda.
Yes.
And
Oh, I
I'm a
have to
yes.
abstain. Yeah, abstain from the second of the two because I wasn't there. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then I'm a yes. So I think that passes 4-0 and 3-0 for the two meeting minutes respectively. So moving on to item number 3 for this agenda is the MBTA working group discussion. So as folks may, so high level, the way I want to structure this is kind of go over the feedback we got from the town departments, town council, from the presentation that Aaron and I made to town council this past week, and then go into some of the items that I think are going to be hot button tickets or items for us to figure out going forward as we finalize these regulations. Specifically what the working group wants to do with parking regulations and the parking counts per unit. Discussion on the Greenwood Station District. I do want to circle up, try to finalize the map for compliance with the state. There is a slight nuance that we need to work through as a group, and then talk about what we're going to be looking at for actual drafting of the bylaw, site plan approval, some of those other items that I think are going to be in the more of the medium term, and how we want to structure and divvy up that scope of work in as we're going through that, and then kind of talk about the schedule as we're going forward. So with that being said, I'd like, Aaron, unless you disagree, do you want me to go through the feedback you heard from the town internal departments and town council,
Sure.
or if you want, I can go through it either way.
Yeah, why don't you go through and I'll chime in if I find anything that you missed,
Okay.
and I'll take notes. Yeah.
So for folks in this group, so Aaron had started the kind of evangelizing some of what the initial thoughts were with different staff members with the town staff, town administration. So she and I had a meeting with town administrator Mayo, as well as the ISD building inspector, Mr. DiCristoforo, as well as Bill Rideau from town engineering. And so we talked about what we were thinking, trying to get the staff up to speed with it, as we start talking to town council, making it kind of pushing the work that we've been doing to date. The feedback we got overall from the town council and from the staff was positive in terms of they were appreciative of the work the group's been doing. There was, I think, some mixed messaging as it relates to parking, which we can get into in a little bit more detail, but it seems like there may be some appetite to really have a more thoughtful and engaged conversation with the community to figure out if that 1.5 ratio is the right number. Seemed like there was some potential willingness to come down on that number from the different stakeholders that we were talking to. Potentially, since this is an MBTA focused regulation, go something closer to 1. That's the number, or the not right number, but going from 1.5 closer to that 1 number based on what we're talking about, where we're citing this. There was conceptually, in terms of the map that we presented, some agreement that it made sense. I think that around Wakefield Junction, I think that there was some disappointment, might not be the right word, but there was some thought that Greenwood would be a good opportunity. There was definitely a mix of people who thought that they wanted to do the bare minimum of what we had and not do anything above and beyond to keep control, versus other folks who felt as if we're going through this effort, why stop, just doing the bare minimum for the state. I think the other things that we heard was that, I think, and Julie may be able to give more feedback as it relates to the other conversations that I've had on town council, but there's definitely a split, amongst town council. I think that generally I would say that staff was more supportive of going for a larger districts or Greenwood. And I think the town council, there's definitely a split. Folks probably, even before this effort started, probably know what that kind of split looks like. But I think the biggest thing from my perspective was that idea that the parking regulations, which I think members of this working group talked about potentially looking at a little more thoughtfully, I thought that was kind of the biggest takeaway of something that we, as we engage with the public, want to solicit some feedback and figure out what we think is the right number, and then we can kind of have that conversation more thoughtfully as we go through the balance of the exercise. I don't know, Aaron, if you want to chime in, I think if you think I missed anything from those series of conversations.
No, I think you did a good job. I thought the internal meeting was really positive. I think Steve was happy looking at a different form of housing compared to kind of our mixed use multifamily housing, as well as Ben and Bill. And then the town council, I think you kind of hit it on the head that it seemed kind of split, and I kind of walked away. Kind of, do we make Wakefield Station smaller, or do we continue to grow into Greenwood? I'm still a little torn on the direction there. So yeah. I think that was it.
So with that being said, what I'd like to do right now is I'd like to pull up the map, kind of walk through some of the items that we have to adjust in terms of Wakefield Junction for the purposes of, unless anyone has any questions, I don't want to just breeze by that set of feedback.
Yeah, so the parking issue, has street parking that have come up at all about potentially lowering the threshold for required parking that is going to be overflow on the street? Did that come up much, or is that an issue with any of the towns, the town council or the town department?
So, I mean, we kind of had a little conversation about that in the internal department meeting. Town council, and if I don't know if we,
I don't think we really touched upon it. I think Jim
Yeah.
said it's an issue that we would like your direction from
yeah,
more direction on, but we did not get into the details of it at all.
Yeah, and I was-
To me, it seems like it potentially is going to be the sticking point with people is that more and more cars are being parked on the street. And if there are no controls for that, some of these units could be 2 or 3 cars per unit, which gets pretty overcrowded. So,
Well, the fact that this is fairly near the MBTA as well, we do have a lot of parking restrictions already around train station, for instance. So, yeah, I don't know, they would not, presumably if they're near the train station, they wouldn't be able to park near their home.
so are we potentially saying that we would be putting some new parking regulations in these overlay districts to coincide with MBTA parking areas, or just so I can,
I don't think anybody said that. No, I don't think
No.
anybody said that.
okay.
yeah, that was not discussed as of yet. No, I think what my homework was to do, and I haven't done yet, is I think I might have said this at the council meeting as well as the internal, working with Sherry and Steve to see currently too, when we have for resident permit parking, on street in our downtown area. Like I know, Chestnut on the Main Street side, there's some resident parking there. What that kind of looks like already for resident permit parking, but it's only a few streets. So but we didn't really get into the weeds about regulations about on street or anything like that.
Yeah, you're right, Aaron. I misspoke. You're right. There are special permits for residents near the MBTA. Yeah, you're right.
All right, just,
Something we should talk about though. Good point.
yeah, I think it would help be a selling point, because again, we're gonna need to have some issues to help sell this. And I think if we can say that there are some types of tools that can be used to help make sure that these are truly commuter type housing going in, I think that would definitely help. I see that as an issue right now, because I see a lot of parking, it's not being enforced. People that park all day, take the train coming out of Greenwood. So, and I see there's really not much enforcement right now. So, all right, that was my own.
That's a great point.
Okay, yeah, I think that my main takeaway from the conversations was that parking, because Aaron and I communicated to the group was that this body had set the 1.5 as the number on the basis of we were trying to take as many of the elements that were existing within the zoning and, for lack of a better term, copy paste them into this new potential overlay. And the feedback we got was, is that on that specific number, is that the correct approach, or is the correct approach to try to be more thoughtful, and charged us to kind of engage with the topic a little bit more thoughtfully in terms of just, is that the right number? And I think that there's probably a further conversation that's warranted from that. So with that being said, and Aaron, I don't know if you can enable screen sharing. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to just pop open the overlay map that we currently have identified, and I'd like to go over I know that Aaron mentioned that this may or may not be an issue in the past, but we did get some additional feedback regarding the continuity of the district. So you can see we have 5 distinct districts right now that don't touch. And Aaron, can you kind of give an update as it relates to the conversations that you and Ezra have been having with the state as it relates to the adjustment that we're gonna have to make in order to be in compliance?
Yeah, so I had a call with the guy who's like the end all be all for MBTA communities at the state. And probably about 2 weeks, a week and a half ago at this point, and I showed him our map. It actually came from fruition from a meeting that I sat on, and I brought this up to him. And he said, yes, we need it to be contiguous. And so we were looking at different areas. I don't know where that drawing thing is. Can you just draw? I don't know. I was going to draw what we looked at, but we looked at the lower common area here, and could we possibly connect these 2 areas? But then I thought that might get people up in arms, even if we know it's not going to be developed. So then I talked about this North Ave. I'm pointing my arrow like you guys can see, but the North Ave intersection, or the intersection of North Ave and Church Street. Those 3 parcels that are on the left or right there. I'm sorry, next to the nope. Church and North Ave by the lake. To your right, yes, those. So I asked if those 3 would be looked as connecting with the mustard orange, due to he didn't realize that was a train that was cutting through, and he said to me, and he's like, you can kind of say, mark my words that I said this, that I would say that is contiguous. And then it also, I kind of was explaining to him that a year or 2 ago that the planning board was hoping to, have a lakeside district to kind of protect the views of the lake and kind of keep away from commercial. So I thought those 3 parcels would be a nice addition to that, to kind of keep it still residential, even though I know the one on the corner there isn't currently residential. So that is my initial thoughts. It's not going to change the numbers. I think that middle parcel won't even count really towards the 4,000 square feet a lot. It's too small, I believe. So it really would just be those 2 lots added. And still our numbers pretty much stay the same. And the state said that would be fine. And so, yeah, so the orange and red would be connected, and then we would be all set with the contiguous. But again, that's up to the group if that's the route they want to go.
And Aaron, we need the continuous because we don't have one area that meets their minimum size.
Yeah, so one of the districts has to be 50%. With the size has to be 50%. So basically Ezra was saying that if we removed, I believe if we removed like the gray and one of the other, like the brown, I believe, I don't have my notes open right in front of me, that this yellow would be 50% of the total acreage, if that makes sense. So right now, the yellow isn't 50%. And so we'd have to connect the 2. And yeah, and then that would make that whole district over 50% contiguous, if that makes sense. It's confusing. And again, it's like all these numbers that you have to plug together. But yeah, at least 2 districts have to be contiguous with each other, and it has to be over 50% of your overall district size. And so that would help that.
So, I mean, if we just need one parcel to connect the 2, am I clicking this thing? No, I guess it's not enabled or. But there is could we not find the smallest linkage as opposed to something that's kind of already commercial or multifamily?
I mean, I guess you could, but I think this area just makes more sense up here, because then you have I don't know where the white, hold on. No. In my eyes, it's just made the most sense around the lake, because, we talked about this area up on the top right corner, protecting the lake and having residential there. I'm not totally against this corner lot from planning perspective, still staying residential at this intersection of North Ave and Church, just because it is pretty much all residential in the frontage of this Church Street area here. And I believe, if I don't have my Google Maps open right now, but I mean, we could link it elsewhere. I don't think that would be a problem. I think that just, to me, made the most sense because a lot of these other ones are currently commercial. Like I know this big, if you go down to North Ave, North and Avon, or I think it's Avon Street. The big parcel up here, I believe that's that big brick building that has the eyeglass on the first floor, and then these few other ones. I think a couple of them might be sprinkled in as residential. But as you go further down North Ave towards Wakefield Station and the Galvin, it's definitely more commercial based. So that was kind of my thought process.
What if you took the southerly corner of Yale? There's a couple houses in there that are residential. So basically one street down from Church.
Oh, those two parcels right there.
Yeah, actually,
Um,
there's 3 parcels in there that would.
oh yeah,
I'm just looking on Google on those.
yeah, I was just pulling out from Google. I mean, I don't see that being an issue.
I mean, one of them is a commercial building, it's the salon. But the corner unit is a residential, I mean, that's one, so the southerly side of Yale. That would be another connection. That way you would eliminate the former gas station at the corner of,
So you would keep
Church.
that, the Church in North Ave, that gas station that's right there, or auto shop that's currently there?
yeah, I
Yeah.
would keep, I could see that potentially being a restaurant site or something like that, so I wouldn't want necessarily put housing right in now.
Okay. Yeah, I'll leave that conversation open to this group.
And
What they-
literally, you just need a smaller connection as possible. So,
Yeah, just a linkage between the districts. So like I said, I looked at Lower Common too. Is that the technical name for it, Lower Common? Yeah, and thought about doing that. But again, it might pull away from the numbers. I didn't play around with it that much, but I didn't think it would bring down the 15 units per dwelling unit too much. So I kind of looked at that area. But for me, I think it made more sense on the other side because it's those two districts with the commercial districts, our hands are kind of tied between the gray and the green and then the red and the green. And same with gray and brown. So really it's working with the red and orange, I feel like.
Although, isn't the red and orange really linked because the triangle of the Lower Common isn't available, so it's not a parcel that's separating the two, it's, undevelopable?
I mean, yeah, you just have to include it in the map, I guess, is what I'm saying. It would just, the information would have, yeah. So I would just have to, you said red and orange, right?
No, red and green. So the Lower Common triangle separates them, but that's not buildable land, so really those parcels are touching.
Yeah, I mean, you could make it, to be completely transparent, I hate saying this on the record, it seems like there's some flexibility if you can make the pitch that this is why you're doing what you're doing, to be completely honest.
Well, I mean, it's no different than the train tracks, that it's not really a parcel in the sense of something developable or zonable. So I don't know. Maybe that doesn't.
I
give me
mean,
the
I
50%.
guess people could look down the road, it's owned by the town, they could sell the town's gonna sell it off and they're gonna allow multifamily housing here now that it's zoned by right. I mean, what are the chances of that really happening? Very low, but very low, but I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing out. I understand what you're saying. I mean, yeah, I guess what you're saying too, Matt, with, I'm looking at Yale Street here between, I mean, yeah, I think this building, I actually was looking at this building the other day and looking at what its acreage was, is, this blue, kind of gray and blue one on the corner of Yale. The frontage is actually on Yale Street.
Yeah.
Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah,
I think that one even might, I was looking to see how many units that was, because I was like, wow, that's a tight, I was trying to vision in my head, you know, what these new developments were gonna look like. And that one kind of stood out to me, and it looks fairly new. So I don't think it's going anywhere. So you could just have that linkage there on that small parcel.
yeah, it looks like it's already a two-family house anyways. And then the next one up on Yale is also a two-family, so. I mean, technically, I suppose you could add a dormer, a third floor, and put another unit on there.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's directly adjacent to the tracks. That is exactly what this is intended to do, is to get
Yeah.
some housing. So, if we're looking for a bare minimum length, I think that might be the place to go. Again, I might want to leave off the corner of, Church and North, just because.
Yeah.
You know, it's an auto body place now. It has a lot more potential than housing units.
I'd love to know what the rest of the group has any thoughts.
I'd advocate to make that that transition at Yale, just based on what the existing condition is, and to try to make the link as de minimis as possible.
I agree. I think the three lots at the corner of North Ave and Church would be a convenient solution if we're trying to. There's another concern about keeping building height down around the lake, but if the lot on the corner where it isn't residential now and it may become something different, then the spot at Yale seems to make the most sense to me.
Great. Okay, Julie, I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, not really. I mean, I agree. It should be the minimal that we have to do.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I think Yale has a lot of residential, so connecting those two that are already residential with that, I think would be sufficient enough for the I keep saying their old name, DHCD, Executive Office of Living Communities, yeah, something like that. So let me plug those numbers in. Ezra sent me the most up-to-date spreadsheet we have in the compliance model. I don't see it changing very much, but I'll send you guys the updated information so you have it with a map as well.
So Aaron, if that gets locked down in terms of that, you know, we add those two parcels to it. Are we at the point where we can say that we have a map that we think can comply with the state, and we could finalize that component for that submission, and now we just need to get into the drafting?
I would say so, yes.
Okay. So if other people in the working group feel the same way, but I feel as if the map that we've come up with, I feel pretty good about, and I feel like we should just get to the point where we say this is going to be the map that we're going to present as a end product from this group, and then start soliciting feedback once we start that conversation with planning board, town council, ZBA, environmental sustainability, and engaging with the public more fully. And I think if we do that, then I think, you know, because the parking, if anything, we're talking about maybe lowering, is only going to make the map better. So I think if we have the map that we feel good about, I feel like it makes sense to start pushing that, unless other people disagree or have any other comments or adjustments they'd like to see to the map as currently constituted.
I think that it's a good approach. I also think we should have in the back burner what the extreme bare minimum
Mhm.
is, because there are gonna be people pushing for that. We're gonna have to sell why we think that the map up here is better for all of downtown Wakefield, not just to comply. But if it comes down to, the final at town meeting and this is gonna fail and we say, well, potentially this is the bare minimum, if we really, people are really wanting that, I think we should make sure we know what that answer is.
And I think to that effect, Aaron, if we make this link at Yale, could we
Yep.
rerun the numbers based on the orange, the red, and the gray? I
Yep.
think that's where we started, and unless other folks on the working group disagree, I feel like that if we were really forced to hit the bare minimum, I feel like that where we started probably makes the most sense, unless there's disagreement, because I think my understanding is that those three districts are pretty close to the bare minimum from what we had initially had those conversations around.
I could probably tell you this meeting. I have the spreadsheet open, so if you just give me, you guys talk and I'll chime in whenever. I could probably could let you know.
Yeah, I agree with Jim. I think that's what our initial thought was. I think we make a good argument to adding in the other sections to basically surround more housing around the downtown area, the business district of Main Street is what we're obviously trying to promote. So getting more people around there is a good thing. Where unfortunately the MBTA community shifts a lot of the housing away from downtown. They're trying to shift it and center it back. And I think that's, to me, would be my push of why this is a better map than simply just complying with the bare minimum.
From describing our approach, I think this graphic with an overlay reminding folks of both the train pathway as well as the bus, because that helps explain why the epicenter is where it is and how the stuff on the eastern side, it makes sense because there's other resources in terms of transportation. I think without it, people would say, well, those are fringe and too far away. So I think adding, that info as part of our narrative would help people understand how folks with maybe less parking or even just they don't have the cars still make use of multiple transportation options.
I think that's a really good idea. I also think somehow coloring where the mixed use areas are, and I think it will help explain why we're staying away from those and why having more density around those will help businesses, in theory.
You mean the commercial areas, like highlighting those?
Commercial areas, yeah.
Okay.
Because I think
I
it's
guess-
all a narrative, right? It's all why.
Oh,
it's-
yeah. Mhm.
We have to be really good at telling, at kind of sharing the narrative.
And I believe that the circle you see around this map right now, I believe is the half mile from the train station at Wakefield Station. So that's kind of our mixed use multifamily overlay district at the
You're
current.
talking about this
Yeah,
this
yeah,
purple, yeah, that's the half mile.
yeah. So that's currently what we have. So we have that highlighted. And then, yeah, I like your idea, Julie, kind of having those different stories of between the bus line, the commuter rail, then highlighting the commercial usage areas and how we're really trying to do that.
Yeah, I mean, if you can have
multifamily.
different overlays come on as we're telling the story, and then how it all holds together.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay. I think that if we're all in agreement of that's the process. So what we'll do is we'll move forward with the map, basically with this one minor tweak to get that continuity. We'll run the numbers based on, as Aaron's probably doing in the background as I'm talking, on the bare minimum, and then we'll start the graphics, and then we can use this to start as the basis with the conversation with the public and everyone else. The other thing I wanted to kind of put on other people's radar and get feedback on is, so I think this is the map that we're going to be submitting to the state for compliance. but then there's the map that we actually have to draw and put in our zoning. And I'm confident that other people will agree, having a map that has a number of these, I don't think we necessarily want to make a zone that is lot by lot this specific, unless people disagree. But I think what makes the most sense would be to go through and have an effort where we do some sort of offset off of the main thoroughfares that we're worried about, and draw, basically draw a line, something similar to this, right, where you'd have, this would be a zone that would be excluded, and then everything to the south of it would actually be infilled. And then if you don't have 100% within the zone, you'd be excluded, or something to that effect. If I'm not being clear, then please let me know. I know it's kind of a weird situation, but the zoning would look something, more akin to this. Something more akin to that, right? That instead of, so you have an offset off of North Ave. You know what I mean?
So you're saying less like actual lots and more just solid
Yeah.
overlay?
Because
Yeah.
then you could define what this, this line's relationship is to North Ave.
Yeah,
So you
okay,
could exclude anything that fronts off of it. This is an open question. I just want to, if we're talking about trying to finalize on, we have the map that we're trying to finalize for compliance with the state, but then we probably want to come up with whatever the map that actually looks like that we're going to present to the public before we start that process.
Yeah, I'm all for having an actual definable something off of the street right of way, because I know how GIS mapping can change and have a lot in, and a couple A&R plans, suddenly we've expanded it. So I agree. I think I agree with Jim. Some kind of offset off of the street, maybe 100 feet facing each way of the street or something like that. But I prefer that myself.
I rely on you guys having dealt with issues on how boundaries are drawn to know if this helps prevent problems in the future. So, as opposed to by parcel, so.
Yep, I'd agree with that.
So Aaron, do you need anything from this group to try to finalize what that actual end product would look like? Or do you want to go through any specific components where you may have challenges at this point? Or do you think you have enough to come up with an initial?
It's 100, you said, off the main corridors there.
Yeah, so it'd be like 100 feet off of North Albion, Maine. Those would be the primary ones.
Okay.
The only thing that I'd ask this group is if it end up picking up a couple extra, for example, right here, I could see, would we want to have it just be adjusted to exclude all of these, or do we, is that a big enough priority of people that we would want to make sure that those lots, for example, are included on any offset?
Well, I think we could write it. That we have frontage on, say, Yale, back 100 feet, something like that. Frontage on Chestnut back that way. It basically excludes any lot that is on, that has frontage or touches. I don't know if touch is the right word, but on North and Main Street. We're trying to basically exclude these from this process.
Yeah.
So we would say it has to have frontage and be, within 100 feet back from the northerly and southerly line of Chestnut and Yale and Avon, something like that. I think that would cover everything we show here, yet exclude the business district.
I have a question for you. I'm just thinking this, sorry, I was plugging in numbers too. What about those two parcels we just discussed? How would that play into that? I guess they don't have frontage technically on North Ave.
Correct, they would, their frontage appears from Google and Street Views that they face, Yale,
Okay,
so I think we would cover that. And
Okay.
basically, then it would just include those two parcels and exclude that one that exclusively has frontage on North Ave, which is a business. Currently a business, so I think that would work.
Wouldn't it just kind of look like something like this, right? Where you're basically take the depth of whatever those two parcels are. You know, you can define that off the right of way. Just make sure you grab those two, but the rest of
got
it
it.
would look
Can,
something
yeah,
like
fall
this.
within those lines, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
You know, and
Okay.
ideally, whatever this offset is would be similar to this offset for this one.
Yep,
So, yeah,
right.
what's going to happen is it'll look like this will look like a mistake, but it's an intentional look like a mistake.
All right, I just saved that.
Okay.
So the only thing I could see potentially happening is, so say the post office lot
Hmm,
was sold off to someone, they could technically then put a couple approval not required lots on Yale, and then they would then fall into this district. So, but I don't know if there's a way to, I don't think we can cut that out anymore, you know, try to restrict that anymore. It's just, some things are gonna happen. Again, I doubt that the post office site will be sold off to someone and then someone would put A&R plan, you know, an A&R plan together for a couple small lots on Yale, but it's potentially could happen. Let's put it that way.
I'm personally not that concerned about that, really.
No, I'm not, but technically it could happen.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good point.
Just to be clear, you're talking about kind of in this area right here.
Correct, yeah. Again, the chances of happening are extremely slim, but it's just to point out that something like that could technically happen.
So in that case, I think what I'm hearing is if folks on the working group are comfortable, we can proceed with kind of trying to finalize the map that we're going to have for the compliance with the state, and then we'll provide direction to Aaron to work with the GIS members of the town to develop what's going to be the actual map that we'll present to the town, come up with the offsets, and we can kind of see what that looks like. And then assuming that that's where we all want it to be, then we can utilize that and start the actual public engagement process, because that'll be the real map that we would theoretically be voting on if everyone, you know, no one had any comments between now and the end, which I'm sure won't happen. But and then from there, I think we'll start that public engagement process in terms of the map, because I think that's going to be the most controversial component of this. Does anyone disagree? I don't want to speak for the group.
No, I think we need to start getting things out, you know, get something out to get, I mean, public is available now, but you know, really get people's feedback so we can know how to react.
Yeah, the sooner we have something concrete to roll out, I think the better we'll off, to be honest.
Okay. Then the next thing I wanted to kind of circle back on is, so we got some, as I kind of mentioned earlier, we got some positive feedback at the staff level and some mixed feedback at the town council level as it relates to the Greenwood station that I'll call a discretionary additional zone. When the topic came up with the planning board, the feedback was that the planning board was supportive because even though the math for the compliance model doesn't work for Greenwood, it was always it's a potential overlay that's near transit in the spirit of the law and the spirit of why this group was convened. So there seemed to be some appetite from the planning board's perspective of, if this group agreed that that was still was an advantageous thing for the town to potentially cite just I'll call it a discretionary zone around the Greenwood station. With that being said, I wanted to circle up with this group. If anyone else had any other conversations that may contradict that with your respective bodies, and get feedback whether or not we continue to think that's something that would be advantageous, and if so, we can start talking about what that would look like in terms of trying to develop that. And at this point, it sounds like the appetite from the feedback we got was that that would probably want to be a separate effort as it relates to proposal from town council or town meeting.
I have a question. So while planning, you said supports it, do they support us looking into it, or do they feel that it should be a different group focused just on it?
The planning board indicated they were supportive of this group continuing that work on the basis that we were convened for to evaluate compliance for this MBTA overlay, but this was kind of a similar effort, and frankly that the planning board would have liked to have had Greenwood be part of this compliance, but it couldn't because of the math associated with the existing lots.
I think if it is a separate effort, I didn't talk to my group, so I can't speak for them, but just thinking of what I vibe on the town is that people wouldn't want us to have it, unless it was under the umbrella of the mandatory. But not to say we can't put it in front of folks to see it, like for the reasons we've talked about before. There's there's buses, there's trains, why have only a part of the town, have the benefits of this, so.
Yeah, I'd be in favor of continuing on the path of keeping this in the discussion and see how it rolls out. If everyone's against it, then it can be eliminated and it won't harm anything. But if enough people think that's a good idea, then you can move forward with it. So I'd want to keep it in.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think as long as there's a way to carve it out at town meeting, if it really isn't, favorable, then let's do it. I mean, I know there were a couple of my colleagues who said they want to only do the bare minimum, and I don't think that's because they don't want more housing. I think it's just, it's the by right and all of that. And as we talked about on the last meeting, sometimes there might be other ways, or different criteria that we can use in Greenwood, but let's keep looking at it.
Matt, I'd be interested in hearing what your thoughts are as it relates to that potential evaluation of a I'll call it the discretionary zone around Greenwood.
Sure. Well, initially, I had sort of come into this thinking that, I needed to learn more about the benefits of having a second district in town, other than the one that I had initially thought would come into being, and which is what we're, you know, discussing here around Wakefield Station. I think it's certainly worth the effort of continuing to consider and put in front of people. And as I said before, it's sort of my first foray into municipal governance, and you know, I'll be curious to see how it all rolls out and what people's reactions are. So I'm happy to serve as sort of a litmus test as a, you know, resident who hasn't really had to consider what a greater public body might think about this type of proposal. So I guess that's sort of where I stand. I'm very much in favor of continuing to consider a discretionary district and learning more about the benefits of it actually coming into being versus, you know, what the public reaction might be.
You're muted, Jim.
Thank you. Well, with that being said, so if it sounds like there's some appetite to at least evaluate it, to solicit feedback from the wider community, does it make sense for this group to take a look at what that would potentially look like? We could either do that now, or we could punt that to a later meeting and evaluate that. Before we wrap up, I did want to kind of circle back on the parking component, and then the kind of the draft of the bylaw and site plan approval and what that process looks like before we wrap up for the night.
I'm just switching to the phone. I will be right back. I just have to go out.
Based on my conversation tonight, I would think of being the best interest of the group and getting the public engagement process going if we just finalize the zoning, maybe table Greenwood for tonight and use that for a future meeting until we can kind of finalize or at least have draft for our zoning bylaw. So we can begin the public engagement process, or at least start planning for it, or for me to be able to do the pre-adoption meeting, or this group, the pre-adoption meeting with the state, to make sure that everything looks good. But I'm more the internal person that just wants to check the boxes.
And Aaron, can you just clarify one thing? The pre-adoption meeting that you're talking about that you need to hold with the state, what does that look like? And do you have everything that you need if we finalize this map to do that?
No, I don't. I just had it open right here. So I just need to give them, I can just fill out an application. They did say they'd be willing to meet with me, you know, as much, you know, when they can. I don't know where I put it. Oh, so what I need for that is the completed compliance model Excel spreadsheet, which I do have, a zip folder containing complete GIS shapefile data. So I would have that. I probably would create two different districts or two different files for, you know, just meeting compliance, and then the one that we're proposing. And then I need a copy of the municipal zoning ordinance or bylaw and zoning map. So I would love if we could get the bylaw going. So if they have any concerns about that, we can address that sooner than later.
Yeah, I also agree with, let's keep Greenwood in our thoughts, and as we move forward, we solicit from people how they might, if we would do that, how they would envision the zone, the density there. So let's not spend any time on, or too much time on that, if any time right now, and use that as a discussion piece as we move forward.
Okay, so in that case, in terms of the draft bylaw, so I know we've had a couple preliminary conversations, but we haven't really started to engage in it more fully. So in terms of putting together draft bylaw, I think that at this point, we've kind of talked, there's the draft bylaw the state issued for compliance with the MBTA communities law in general, as well as our existing mixed use overlay, which has a discretionary permit involved associated with it. We talked about kind of going through and potentially utilizing either one of those. It looks like regardless, we're going to have to really look at what that site plan approval is and how much we do or do not want to include as it relates to design standards for that, because if a project meets the design standards, then theoretically that comes as a right, and they can pull, they should be entitled to a site plan approval without any discretionary conditions imposed on them. So kind of conceptually, I'm not sure what the best way to start in terms of getting this draft put together is. I think that we could kind of do a couple different ways, and I'd be interested in understanding if other people view it the same or different, but kind of view it as we could either have one of us go through and kind of create a draft template of it, taking the either the basis of the zoning from the state and or the zoning from the mixed use overlay district, and then have the group look at it in advance and start kind of, for lack of a better term, grinding through all the different provisions one by one. Or we could look to try to create a more collaborative process where we all look at it together and start creating it. I'm hesitant just that because I know that editing by committee is exceptionally painful. So I'm not sure if it makes sense to have someone or task someone to go through a first draft, or what that process would look like. But be interested, and I don't have any defined real hard thoughts, but I'd be interested in getting feedback in terms from other people what they think would make sense in terms of at least starting that process with the draft bylaw.
I guess I'll just start. I thought Ezra's point to kind of keep it, well, one, keeping this by itself and keeping it separate. So if there's changes, it's just to this, but also staying in line with the sample bylaw that the state sent over. I guess we could use that as our starting point because it gives the state, when we're going for approval, it might make the process a little easier for all of us. So I would recommend starting with that document, and maybe someone here in partnership with me can start plugging away at that. And if we bring it back to the group and kind of compare it to what we have already for our mixed use or what we have already for some of our bylaws, we can make necessary changes there if we find we need to.
I think that makes sense. I think it makes sense to start with some kind of draft that can be presented to the rest of this group and perhaps get some collective editing going from that point once everyone's had a chance to review a draft and formulate some thoughts on it, maybe even mark one up themselves to share with the group. But I think editing by committee from the jump is probably not the way to go.
Yeah, I agree. As painful as it's going to be for one person to go through this and get something the first draft, it would be much better than spending hours on negotiating and discussing everybody's details. I think starting from something is much better than trying to create from a group.
Can we nominate Greg for that since he's on the zoning board and not here tonight?
I'll second that. I mean, truthfully, someone from the ZBA may be the best one to go through this because they're more involved with this. They deal with it not every day, but every other week. So that might be a good place to start.
So in that case, maybe what we'll do is, Aaron, why don't you and I circle up in terms of trying to figure out how to come up with the starting point, because there's a bunch of stuff in here that I don't know if other people have gone through it, but I've kind of run through it a couple of times. A lot of things that look like that you can just kind of eliminate right off the bat, and maybe it ends up being we hive off sections of it based on, to your point, Matt, the having one person go through it is probably the way to go.
Yeah, and if we want to break it up into sections and then divvy it up to,
Yeah.
I'd be willing to deal with a section. I don't know if I could deal with the whole thing.
Yeah.
But, one little section I could go through and then could put these sections together and then.
Yeah. The one other question is, does everyone have a copy of the sample zoning from the state?
I have it. Aaron sent it last month, I think. I don't know, somewhere in my inbox.
I also sent over Lexington's too, which I'm looking if I didn't have, I looked at it quickly, but I'm looking more of it now and comparing it to what the state has. We might be able to pull some things. I mean, there's a little different than what we're looking to do, but yeah. Yeah, yeah, Jim, and you and I can talk and maybe next meeting kind of, I have no problem, this is my job, start kind of going through it and doing pretty obvious things that need to be in the bylaw. And then maybe it's another set of eyes kind of plugging things in, and then maybe kind of assign pieces for other people to kind of go a little deeper.
Yeah, I think that might be the best way to do it, because I mean, the first thing right off the bat, right? So just for people, I'm looking at it right now, it's like 52 pages.
Yeah.
Probably about half of them can be eliminated immediately because it's all commentary that we're not gonna obviously include. And then there's a bunch of stuff in here, like I don't think we're gonna have a definition section for just this section of the bylaw, right? So there's a bunch of stuff that we could probably get rid of relatively easily. So Aaron, why don't you and I connect offline and we can kind of figure out, I'm trying to figure out how to come up with the baseline of this, and then we can kind of go from there. I do know a number of these items are also, a lot of these tables are already kind of prefixed, since we already kind of had those conversations around what the size, setbacks, etc. are going to be.
Yeah, it's kind of
So-
like plug in. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a plug and chug exercise for some of these things. So what we can do that, and then we'll kind of start trying to figure out how to get to that. So Aaron, you need a full sample draft bylaw in order to have a preconditions meeting with the state.
I mean, an official meeting with the state, he basically said if I need any more help, but it does say number 3 on here, what you need to have is a copy of the municipal zoning ordinance or bylaw and zoning map.
Okay.
But again, it's a draft, I'm assuming. So I think you can be pretty transparent with that.
Okay. Yeah, it just means that I for some reason I thought that was not part of the requirement to really start the conversation with the state. So, so if we need that, then
This is just a separate, this is like their formal pre-adoption review application that I have to, and it's 90 days prior to the local legislative session to allow for a timely. So we have time to work on it.
Okay.
I'll send this over.
Yeah, that sounds great. And then I guess the other question I would have for this group is, if we get the finalized map and say between now and I think our next meeting is August 1st, but if we have on August 1st the finalized map, do people feel comfortable, even if we don't have the full bylaw written, going and starting that public engagement process with all the relevant boards, councils, and obviously engagement with the public?
I think so. I mean, we've talked about kind of the things that people are most going to ask about. And by not having everything kind of drafted may make people more comfortable to speak up on making sure, that they don't feel like it's a done deal or anything like that. So it is a perception of that it's still being worked on. We're listening. We want to hear from them. And Erin said that she could have another call at the state at any time. So it's not like we're doing this in isolation without their feedback.
Yeah, I agree. If we bring something we think's 100%, turns people off, that say, well, then why are you even asking me as a comment? So I agree, we should be doing this as we're still working on it.
Okay, so in that case, we'll plan on doing is, maybe the next meeting, we'll plan on reviewing the finalized map. We'll all agree, nod our heads, yes, then we'll start that public engagement process with all the development boards and boards, and assuming, Aaron, maybe you and I circle up and that draft public engagement concept, we push back to this group again, as well as and then start talking with all the relevant boards to see if they have availability or desire to see that finalized map of what we're presenting. Okay, and then the only other thing I had that we need for the list for today was to talk about the parking regulations. I think at this point, we've had a number of conversations around parking. I think it probably makes sense to just, I think unless other people in the group disagree, what I would advocate to do is to basically try to bring the parking number from this group to the wider community as kind of an undefined number, for lack of a better term, and maybe try to facilitate and say, we initially thought 1.5, there may be some interest in going to a lesser number, and to solicit feedback from the wider community. I don't know if other people think that's an appropriate approach, or people have a specific number that they'd like to advocate or have further conversation around.
From somebody who thinks about parking a lot, I really like that. I think people should be able to talk about it. And I think we'll hear a broad range.
I agree.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think we should talk about it. I am doing more, and I kind of advocated this a little earlier, is I'm actually walking around a lot of these areas to see what the existing condition is on a lot of these streets. And I'm noticing a lot more people parking, where they're parking. Just so when someone does bring up those issues, I can say, well, yeah, I understand there's an issue out there, the street's narrow, something like that. So I'm pushing for maybe other people to go out and take a walk around and see what the neighborhood's like. See a lot and walk around and see how many driveways there are, the distance between the spaces that can park, how many people can park out there. It's interesting to see as you're walking along, the streets are full and driveways are empty. So there are a lot of people that I think purposely staking their claim is moving their car out in the street in the morning and leaving there all day just say that's there. So I think it's going to be a big issue, and I might buy it. That's about it.
Also, if you go, I can send the link to the group, but to see the streets that for the resident permit parking, a lot of the streets that we highlight in this area. I'll send the link to you, but it's on the town administrator's licenses and application, but they have a list of the streets for the resident permit parking, just to give you an idea.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
And just so you guys, and Jim, let me know when we're done the parking conversation. I just had some numbers to let you guys know about.
Yeah, honestly, I think unless anyone else has anything else, I think that I'm getting ready to wrap up, and I think we can probably convene it for tonight. So Aaron, if you had something else you wanted to add to the parking discussion, please go forward.
So you wouldn't believe this. So if we were to do the bare minimum with those 3 districts, we probably would have to add a few more parcels somewhere, because with that being said, District 1, District 2, District 3, that's the yellow, red, and gray, gets us 1635 for the final unit capacity per district, and we need 1696. So what we currently have wouldn't meet the minimum of the state. So we'd have to, again, maybe look at those maps a little more and add certain parcels somewhere. I think it goes back to how we removed some of those around the playing field on by Molten. I think if you added those, I think we'd meet it. But the dwelling unit per acre would still be fine. It would be 16.3. So yeah. So just wanted to let you guys know, if we just did those 3 districts, that's what we're currently looking at right now.
Hey, Aaron, can you repeat the number that we need is the 1697,
1696.
96, and that got you, what was it? It was 16 what?
1635.
So we need about 15, well, we need like 16 or 17 new units or new
Yeah.
lots.
Basically, yeah. Yep. And just so you guys know, with the 5 districts, 2,355 that we have right now. So I just said I would do that for you guys while we were talking.
I don't know if other people on the group agree, but I think that if we wanted to show like the bare minimum compliance method, I think if you just re-add the lots around on Gould Street around the Molten Playground, that looks like it's maybe slightly over 17 units, just doing a quick count, but it's probably not a ton more than that. I think that makes the most sense if we're talking about like a bare minimum compliance method.
So I could play around with that too and have 2 different compliance models and maps. I think I still have the old map.
Okay.
I think that would be a good selling point of why the bare minimum is not a good strategy. Is, I think adding those parcels around there kind of take away, because it pushes further away from downtown. We want to make things more towards downtown. So if people are looking for the bare minimum and you throw that in there, they may see, okay, well, maybe the bare minimum is not the best idea. So it's good to know.
Okay.
Okay, I think that's everything I had on the agenda for tonight, unless anyone has anything else. Anyone else have anything before I take a motion to adjourn, or hear a motion to adjourn?
I motion for the adjournment.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Matt Lowry, roll call vote.
Yes.
Robin Greenberg,
Yes.
Matt Bowen,
Yes.
Julie Smith Galvin,
Yes.
and Aaron Kokinda.
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. Thank you all for the time, and thank you for the productive conversation.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right. Good night.
Carol.
Bye.
Bye.
Night.